always thought working late at night in the office would be a mundane experience. Little did I know that my decision to stay back in Grayson Tower one fateful evening would turn into a nightmare I could never forget. It was a stormy night, rain pelting against the windows as if trying to break in. Most of my colleagues had already left, leaving me alone in the dimly lit office. The sound of thunder echoed through the empty corridors, creating an eerie atmosphere. I sat at my desk, surrounded by a sea of paperwork, struggling to meet a deadline. The incessant ticking of the clock on the wall seemed to mock my slow progress. As the clock struck midnight, the power went out, plunging the office into total darkness. Panic gripped me, but I fumbled for my phone and turned on the flashlight. The feeble light barely illuminated the vast space around me. I contemplated leaving, but the thought of facing the wrath of my boss and the unfinished work forced me to stay. With my flashlight guiding my way, I made my way to the emergency generator room on the lower floor. The hallway was a labyrinth of shadows, each step sending a chill down my spine. The storm outside seemed to have intensified, its fury growing with every passing minute. The whole building groaned under its weight, as if straining against an invisible force. Finally, I reached the generator room and managed to restore power to the office. The overhead lights flickered to life, casting an artificial glow on my surroundings. Relieved, I returned to my desk and resumed my work, hoping to finish soon and escape the clutches of this eerie night. But something felt off. It was as if the atmosphere had changed, as if an invisible presence lurked just beyond my sight. The air grew heavy, filled with an otherworldly silence. Unease settled deep within me, and I could no longer ignore the growing sense of dread. I glanced around the office, my gaze drawn to the dark corners and empty cubicles. Shadows seemed to dance, elongating and distorting into grotesque shapes. Whispers echoed through the halls, whispers that wormed their way into my mind. I shook my head, trying to rid myself of the delusions, but the voices persisted, growing louder and more insistent. As the night wore on, the whispers evolved into anguished cries and blood-curdling screams. Fear consumed me, my heart racing in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unseen eyes followed my every move. Shadows twisted and contorted, taking on a life of their own. In a desperate attempt to maintain my sanity, I gathered my belongings and decided to leave. But as I reached for the doorknob, a bone-chilling gust of wind rattled the windows. I turned around, and there, standing in the middle of the office, was a figure clad in tattered rags. Its eyes were hollow voids, its mouth stretched into a grotesque grin. It radiated an aura of malevolence that paralyzed me with fear. The figure slowly raised its arm, pointing a long, bony finger at me. It spoke in a voice that resonated in my mind, a voice filled with agony and despair. "You cannot escape," it whispered, the words piercing my very soul. I stumbled backward, desperately searching for an exit, but the office seemed to have transformed into a nightmarish labyrinth. The walls closed in, the ceiling lowered, trapping me in a suffocating embrace. Panic overwhelmed me as I realized there was no way out. The figure advanced toward me, its steps slow and deliberate. Its ethereal form glided effortlessly across the floor, defying the laws of nature. With each step, its presence grew stronger, suffocating me with its malevolent energy. I closed my eyes, pleading for this nightmare to end. But when I opened them again, I found myself back at my desk, surrounded by the same paperwork I'd been trying to finish. Was it all a hallucination? Had I fallen asleep and dreamt the whole thing? As I sat there trying to make sense of what had just happened, the whispers returned, faint at first, then growing louder with each passing moment. The figure reappeared, its grin widening, its hollow eyes fixed on me. It had me trapped in an endless loop of terror, destined to relive the horrors of that night over and over again. Grayson Tower had become a prison for my soul, a place where the spirits of the tormented sought retribution. And as the clock struck midnight, I realized that my fate was sealed, condemned to endure an eternity of fear and anguish within the haunted walls of the office. So, my friend, heed my warning. Never underestimate the power of the unknown, for it lurks in the shadows, waiting for those who dare to venture into the darkness. And should you find yourself working late at night in an office like Grayson Tower, be prepared for the horrors that lie in wait.
The clock struck midnight as I sat alone in the dimly lit office. The rest of the building had long been abandoned, but due to a major project, I found myself working late into the night. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the fluorescent lights above. As I focused on my computer screen, my mind began to wander. Shadows danced along the walls, casting eerie shapes that seemed to move independently of their own accord. It was as if the office itself had come alive, whispering secrets in a language I couldn't understand. Suddenly a chill ran down my spine and a gust of wind swept through the room, rattling the windows. I could have sworn I heard a faint whisper carried by the breeze. I dismissed it as my imagination playing tricks on me and continued working. Time seemed to stretch on and exhaustion started to take its toll. My eyes grew heavy and my concentration waned. That's when I noticed a flickering light down the hallway. It was the copy room, a small space tucked away in the far corner of the office. Curiosity got the better of me and I decided to investigate. Grabbing my phone as a makeshift flashlight, I cautiously made my way towards the source of the flickering light. The closer I got, the more the air around me seemed to thicken, and a sense of unease settled deep within my bones. As I reached the copy room, I hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open. What I saw inside left me frozen in terror. The room was bathed in an eerie green light, emanating from a malfunctioning copier. But that wasn't the worst part. Papers were scattered everywhere, each one containing an identical phrase scrawled in a twisted, unreadable script. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. Panic set in, but I couldn't bring myself to leave the office. The project still loomed over me, and I knew I had to finish it. With trembling hands, I gathered my strength and returned to my desk. Hours passed, and the night grew darker. The office seemed to grow colder, and the air became suffocatingly still. I tried to focus on my work, but an unsettling presence lingered around me. Shadows darted in the corners of my vision, disappearing whenever I turned to look. Just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the printer beside me roared to life, spewing out page after page with rapid intensity. The sound echoed through the empty office, and I could feel my heart leap into my throat. With trepidation, I approached the printer, fear knotting in my stomach. The pages were covered in incomprehensible symbols etched in black ink. They seemed to twist and writhe as if they were alive. The room filled with an acrid smell, and the temperature dropped to an unbearable degree. A voice, cold and otherworldly, whispered from the printer, "You should have left while you still could." My hands shook as I desperately searched for an escape, but the doors were locked, trapping me inside. Panic consumed me, and I felt the walls closing in. The office itself seemed to warp and contort, becoming a sinister labyrinth of corridors and rooms, leading to nowhere but madness. I ran, stumbling through the endless maze, the walls pulsating and shifting around me. Whispers followed me, their voices growing louder with each passing moment. Shadows reached out, threatening to drag me into their abyss. I couldn't tell reality from nightmare anymore. Finally, I collapsed, unable to go on. I found myself in a small, cramped office space, the walls closing in on me. The air grew thin, and the whispers turned into malicious laughter. I knew I was trapped, doomed to spend eternity in this twisted office hell. And so, dear reader, if you ever find yourself working late in an office, be cautious. The shadows may hide secrets, and the walls may hold more than just papers and dreams. And remember, when the clock strikes midnight, the horrors that lurk in the darkness may come alive, waiting for the chance to claim their next victim.